Long ago, in a small village cradled by dense forests and a winding river that sparkled like molten silver, there lived a man named Elias. He was tall, with hands calloused from years of tending fields, and a heart as warm as the dawn. Elias was deeply in love with his wife Lila, whose gentle smile and soft songs could soothe even the wildest storms. Their love was the envy of the village, a flame that burned bright and steady. When Lila announced she was pregnant, Elias's joy was boundless. He spent evenings carving a cradle from the finest wood, singing to the unborn child, and promising Lila a future filled with laughter. But life, like the river, has currents that cannot be foreseen. Lila died, giving birth to their daughter, Mira, leaving Elias with a heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. Yet when he looked into Mira's tiny, trusting eyes, so full of innocence, he found a reason to live. Mira became his world, his sunlight piercing the darkest clouds. 6 months after Lila's death, Elias made a decision that sent whispers rippling through the village. He married again. His new wife, Celine, was a woman of striking beauty, with raven hair that cascaded like a waterfall and eyes that gleamed like polished obsidian. The villagers murmured, and Elias's closest friend, Jonah, confronted him one evening under the shade of an ancient baobab tree. "Elias, why so soon?" Jonah asked, his voice thick with concern. "Lila's grave is barely settled." Elias sighed, his shoulders heavy. "Mira needs a mother, Jonah. She's just a baby. I can't raise her alone. She needs a woman's care." Jonah shook his head, but said no more, though his eyes held a warning Elias couldn't see. Celine stepped into Elias's home with a smile that charmed the neighbors. She cooed over Mira, helped with chores, and spoke sweetly to Elias. But beauty can mask a heart of stone. Within weeks, Celine's true nature began to surface. Mira's cries grated on her nerves. "This child wails too much," she'd snap, covering her ears. "Can't you keep her quiet? I didn't come here to be a nursemaid." Elias, blinded by his need for stability and his hope that Selene would grow to love Mira, ignored the sharpness in her tone. He believed time would soften her edges, that love would bloom where duty stood. He was gravely mistaken. One blistering afternoon, as the sun hung heavy in the sky, Selene suggested a walk to the river. "The fresh air will do Mira good," she said, her voice honeyed but her eyes cold. Elias, cradling Mira in his arms, agreed. The river was a place of peace, its waters dancing under the sunlight, its banks lined with whispering reeds. They settled beneath a towering willow, Mira giggling softly, unaware of the darkness lurking nearby. Celine watched them, her smile a mask. "Elias," she said, her tone overly sweet, "I need some herbs from the forest for a tonic. Could you fetch them? I'll watch Mira." Trusting his wife, Elias handed Mira to Selene and disappeared into the thicket, his footsteps fading into the hum of the forest. The moment Elias was gone, Selene's face twisted into a sneer. She looked at Mira, who played innocently with her tiny fingers, and felt nothing but resentment. To Selene, Mira was a chain, a living reminder of Lila's unbreakable hold on Elias's heart. Without hesitation, Selene carried Mira to the river's edge, where the water churned deep and swift. With a heart as cold as winter's frost, she threw the baby into the current. Mira's faint cry was swallowed by the river's roar, and then there was silence. Selene quickly smeared mud on her face, tore her shawl, and collapsed to the ground, wailing as if her soul had been ripped apart. When Elias returned, herbs clutched in his hands, he found Selene sobbing hysterically. "The river took her," she cried, her voice breaking. "I tried to hold her, but she slipped from my arms. The water was too strong." Elias dropped to his knees, his world collapsing. He stared at the river, its sparkling surface now a cruel mockery of his loss. Tears streamed down his face as he whispered, "If only I hadn't left. If only—" Guilt clawed at his heart, and he blamed himself for trusting Celine, for leaving Mira's side. The village mourned with him, but the river kept its secret, and the trees stood as silent witnesses to the crime. Days turned to weeks, and Elias became a ghost of the man he once was. His laughter was gone, his fields neglected, his home an empty shell. Celine played the part of the grieving mother, weeping at the right moments, but her act was not flawless. At night, she began to hear things. A baby's soft cries, faint but persistent, echoing through the house. She'd wake, sweating, searching for the source, but found only silence. Her dreams grew haunted, filled with the river's accusing ripples and Mira's tiny, searching eyes. She dismissed it as guilt, but the unease gnawed at her soul. One evening, as Elias sat by the river lost in grief, he heard a faint cry like Mira's. His heart raced. Following the sound, he found a small woven anklet floating near the bank, Mira's anklet, crafted by Lila before her death. He clutched it, his fingers trembling, his mind swirling with questions. How had it returned? He carried it home, the anklet burning like a coal in his hand. Confronting Celine, he held it out. "I found this by the river," he said, his voice low and trembling. Celine's eyes flickered with fear for a split second before she forced a laugh. "Many children wear such things, Elias. You're letting grief twist your mind." Her words cut deep, but Elias's trust in her began to fray. Doubt, like a seed, took root in his heart. The next morning, Jonah stormed into Elias's compound, his face dark with anger. "Elias, how can you believe?" "Her lies," he shouted. "A 6-month-old doesn't just vanish in broad daylight." "Open your eyes!" Elias's face flushed with rage. "You're jealous!" he roared. "You can't stand that I've moved on. Get out!" The two men clashed, fists flying, rolling in the dust as neighbors tried to pull them apart. "You're a fool, Elias," Jonah spat, bruised but unbowed. "One day the truth will hit you harder than my fists." With that, he walked away, leaving Elias panting, his heart pounding with anger and shame. Their friendship lay in tatters, a casualty of Elias's blind loyalty. 5 years passed, and the shadow of Mira's loss lingered like a storm cloud over Elias's home. His once thriving fields withered, mirroring the ache in his soul. Elias worked tirelessly, but his heart remained broken, a crack that time couldn't mend. Celine, meanwhile, grew restless. Despite her efforts, she hadn't conceived a child. Each month brought disappointment, and fear crept into her heart. Not for love of motherhood, but for her place in Elias's life. She worried he might seek another wife, someone younger, someone fertile. One evening she sat by the fire, tears streaming down her face. Elias, stirred by her sobs, approached. "Celine, why are you crying?" he asked gently. She wiped her face, her voice trembling. "I'm scared, Elias. What if you leave me because I can't give you a child?" Elias took her hands, his face softening. "I'll never leave you, Celine. You're my wife, with or without children." His words calmed her, but deep down, Celine knew promises could break under pressure. One sweltering afternoon, Celine complained of weakness. "I'm too tired to fetch water," she groaned. "Please, Elias, go to the river for me." Elias didn't argue. He picked up a calabash and set out, the path to the river heavy with memories. The air felt thick, as if the forest itself held its breath. As he knelt to fill the calabash, a small voice called, "Sir, please help me." Elias turned to see a girl, no older than 5, standing a few feet away. Her clothes were tattered, her curly hair wild, and her dark eyes held a sadness that pierced his heart. "I'm lost," she whispered. "I don't know my name, my village, or my parents." Elias's breath caught. Mira's face flashed in his mind. He couldn't leave this child alone. "Come with me," he said, taking her small hand. "I'll keep you safe." When they reached home, Celine's face twisted with confusion, then jealousy, though she masked it with a forced smile. "Who's this?" she asked, her voice overly sweet. Elias explained how he'd found the girl by the river, alone and lost. "She doesn't remember anything," he said. "I couldn't leave her to die." Celine nodded, but her eyes burned with resentment. That night, Elias gave the girl a mat to sleep on near the fire. As she curled up, her breathing soft and even, Elias watched her, a strange warmth stirring in his chest. He named her Nora, for the hope she brought to his darkened heart. Days turned to weeks, and Nora became part of their home. She was quiet, her big eyes always watching, as if searching for something lost. Elias grew fond of her, treating her like his own, but Celine's bitterness grew. Nora's presence was a thorn in her side, stirring memories she'd buried deep. She made snide remarks, ignored Nora's needs, and glared when Elias showed her affection. One evening, as Elias mended a hoe under the fading light, Nora sat beside him. "I don't want to be called Nora anymore," she said softly. Elias paused, confused. "Why, my dear? Don't you like the name?" She shook her head, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that made his heart skip. "Call me Mira," she whispered. The hoe slipped from Elias's hands, clattering to the ground. "Mira was my daughter," he stammered, his voice barely audible. "She was taken by the river when she was 6 months old." Mira looked at him, her gaze steady. "I know," she said. "I know about the herbs, about Celine's lies, about the day you fought with Jonah. I know about the anklet." Elias's heart thumped wildly. "How do you know these things?" he demanded, his voice trembling. Mira placed a small hand on his arm. "I'm your daughter, father. I've come back to bring you blessings. Your fields will thrive, your heart will heal, and the darkness will lift." Elias couldn't speak. His mind raced, torn between disbelief and a strange, growing certainty. The next morning, Elias went to his fields and stopped in his tracks. The dry, barren land was transformed. Green stalks rose tall, leaves vibrant and healthy. The ground, once cracked, was rich and soft. It was impossible, yet there it was. Elias ran home, breathless, and found Mira humming quietly. "It's true," he gasped. "The crops, they're alive." Mira smiled, her eyes twinkling. "I told you. Father, I bring blessings." Overwhelmed, Elias fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. He held Mira tightly, his heart torn between love and confusion. That evening, Elias sat Celine down. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice steady. "Nora doesn't want to be called Nora anymore. She wants to be called Mira." Celine froze, her face twisting with fury. "That brat!" she shouted. "She mocks my pain. How dare she take our daughter's name?" She burst into tears, wailing dramatically. "Oh, my sweet Mira, how I miss you. This girl is a curse, Elias. Send her away." Elias shook his head. "She stays. She's my daughter now until her family is found. If you can't accept her, you're free to leave." Celine's eyes widened, shocked. "You'd choose a stranger over me?" she cried. Elias's silence was answer enough. Celine's tears dried, replaced by a cold resolve. "If you won't send her away, I'll make her life so miserable. She'll beg to leave," she hissed. Elias's eyes narrowed. "Try anything, Celine, and you'll regret it." He walked away, leaving her fuming. The house became a battlefield. Selene refused to cook when Mira was near, spilled water where she sat, and hurled insults at every chance. But Mira never flinched. She moved with a quiet strength, her calm unnerving. One day Selene screamed, "This is my house. You don't belong here." Mira looked at her, unflinching. "This was my home before you stole it," she said, her voice low but piercing. Selene paled, fear creeping into her heart. That night the whispers returned. Baby cries, soft and haunting. Selene tossed in her sleep, chilled despite the fire's warmth. She began to dread Mira, sensing something beyond a child's presence. Desperate, Selene sought a village seer, an old man with eyes that saw beyond the veil. She poured out her fears, how Mira came, her strange words, Elias's devotion. The seer listened, his face grave. "This child is no ordinary girl," he said. "Her spirit is powerful, tied to forces you cannot comprehend. Be careful, woman. Harm her, and you'll face consequences you cannot escape." Selene scoffed, her fear hardening into resolve. "I don't care what she is. I'll make her pay for ruining my life." She stormed out, her mind brewing dark plans. Elias, tormented by Mira's revelations, knew he needed answers. Swallowing his pride, he sought Jonah, the friend he'd driven away. At Jonah's compound, Elias found him sharpening a machete. "Jonah," Elias began, his voice heavy, "I was wrong. I was blind and I hurt you. Please forgive me." Jonah's eyes were cold. "You called me jealous, told me to stay away. Why should I forgive you?" Elias pressed on. "I see now, Jonah. Selene isn't who I thought. I need my friend back." After a long pause, Jonah sighed, dropping his machete. "You're lucky I'm a forgiving man," he said, a small smile breaking through. They embraced, their bond rekindled. Elias shared everything: Mira's arrival, her words, the thriving crops. Jonah's eyes widened. "She's no ordinary child, Elias. We need answers." They sought the village mystic, an old woman adorned with beads, her eyes sharp with wisdom. She listened as Elias recounted his story, nodding slowly. "The river goddess holds the truth," she said. "Go to the river alone, Elias. Offer a white cloth and call her name 3 times. She will reveal who Mira is." Elias thanked her, his heart pounding with anticipation and fear. The next morning, Elias rose before dawn. He tied a white cloth carefully and walked to the river, the path silent save for the rustle of leaves. At the bank, he placed the cloth on the ground and called, "Goddess of the river," 3 times. The wind grew fierce, the water rippled, and from its depths rose a figure, radiant, her hair flowing like waves, her eyes deep as the ocean. Elias fell to his knees. "Great goddess, I seek the truth about Mira," he pleaded. The goddess's voice was soft but commanding. "Mira is your daughter, Elias. Selena, consumed by jealousy, threw her into my waters 5 years ago. She lied, claiming the river took her. I saved Mira, raised her in my care, and sent her back to you when she was ready. Your heart was empty, and she was meant to fill it." Elias's tears fell like rain. "How could I have been so blind?" he cried. The goddess continued, "Selene's womb is barren by my decree. Her wickedness denies her motherhood. Protect Mira, Elias. She is more than your daughter. She is a blessing with a purpose." Elias bowed, sobbing, "Thank you, great goddess." The figure vanished, the river calming as if nothing had occurred. Meanwhile, at home, Mira confronted Selene. "Confess what you did," she demanded, her voice firm. Selene laughed, venom in her eyes. "You're nothing but a motherless stray." Mira's face hardened. "Never insult my mother again," she shouted, raising her hand. As it struck Selene's cheek, a strange force surged. Celine screamed, clutching her head, tearing at her hair and clothes. She stumbled, shrieking, "No! What's happening?" and ran from the house, barefoot, through the village. Villagers froze as she wailed, "I threw Mira in the river. I lied." Her madness grew, and she fled into the forest, her screams fading into the trees. She was never seen again. Elias returned to find Mira at the doorway. His heart broke with guilt and love. He knelt, hugging her tightly. "My daughter," he whispered, tears falling. "I failed you. I'll never leave you again." Mira smiled, her arms around him. "I'll protect you too, Father." In that embrace, the pain of years melted away. Elias's fields flourished, the village spoke of the river's justice, and father and daughter rebuilt their lives, bound by a love stronger than any lie. The river, ever watchful, whispered its approval, and the truth had set them free.